Josh McCarver here with Academy Politics. We're here with Jason and Alberto. Jason was in the Navy as a submarine officer. He's a Naval Academy grad, and he's now an Aberdeen, Maryland City Councilman. We've got Ramos, also Naval Academy grad, also submarine officer, and now serves as Director of Talent Development at New Politics, a nonprofit helping veterans and other people that have served in national service get their foot in the door in politics. So we're here to talk about one topic, and that is local politics. We had Virginia and New Jersey governor races last night, still wrapping up in New Jersey. So some very high-profile political races. And every 2 to 4 years, we hear about lots of high-profile races that a lot of veterans come in out of the service. They want to get involved in politics. They think that they need to run for Congress or, governor or something like that. You don't have to do that. There's a lot of things you could do at the local level that's candidly, and from my perspective, a lot easier to get involved to, a lot less expensive, and a lot less toxic in today's political environment. So I have the unfortunate pleasure of speaking with two Naval Academy grads. As a former infantry officer, West Point myself, I'm going to chat with Alberto and Jason and just learn. So I'll kick it off to Jason. As you're in City Council, you're serving in local office now. Why local politics? Why that?
Yeah, thanks, Josh. So for me, I moved to the new area. I've actually only been in Aberdeen 9 years now, and started looking into it kind of quickly because in Maryland we pay a number of taxes, and so that was my primary motivation, to try and see, to better understand how and what my tax money was spent on. So that's what I started looking into. And you had originally asked the question, why should anybody get involved in local politics? And I think that my example stands that you should have some sort of principle that you're going after, right? So one of the things that we benefit of as veterans is having served is we know about thankless jobs, we know about playing a role, being members of a team, serving a community. But when it comes to office, you really need to have your principles figured out ahead of time so that you can keep those in mind as you're going forward. It's not about wearing the title. It shouldn't be, I should say, not be about wearing the title. So that was the big thing for me, is that I had a problem that I saw that I wanted to resolve, better understand, so I leaned into it, and here I am.
Fantastic. Alberto, I saw you nodding your head. I know
Yeah.
you know. Yep.
I'd mostly love to just foot stomp on everything that Jason just said. I think that, veterans and in our case, national service alumni, they come in sort of having a much more clear sense of what their values are. What is your North Star? What are you hoping to accomplish? They've led in meaningful ways and understand how to lead in difficult bureaucracies or in challenging circumstances and bring a lot to the table in those ways. And I do think that, defer to Jason here because he's actually stepped into the arena and he's doing it. But, local politics gives you an opportunity to make a real impact. There's a lot of conversation right now in our polarized sort of system that we have right now. The very little that's being done at the congressional or federal level. At the local level, that's not the case. And so if there's something that you care deeply about and you want to find a way to pursue it and fix some of those problems, of course, again, there are going to be challenges. It's not that it's easy, but I do think that veterans play an important role in figuring out how to solve some of those issues and make a real impact on the issues, not just that you care about, but that the general population cares deeply about the things that actually affect them in their day-to-day lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Good, fantastic point. Jason, I saw you kind of nod your head, and you mentioned taxes. Well, what are some things that a local politician or local, public servant has influence over or can get involved in?
Another good question. So first and foremost, what I've come to learn more so than from the outside looking in is that at the end of the day, the role of councilman, at least from how we operate here in Aberdeen, is you're stewards of tax money. It all comes back to money. People are asking for services. They are, rating their service. They are placing a value on their service based on the amount of taxes they pay. So just about every conversation is about that in some form. As for what you have influence over, how that tax money gets spent, it's incredible. I mean, I also work full-time as an engineer in the DoD, and the hand waving of tens of thousands of dollars is incredible. And even at the local level, you can see some of those things. I mean, and it's silly, $150 a piece for phone chargers. And you're like, what contract did we sign to do that? That's crazy, right? That's not an actual example, it's hyperbole, but still, like, I mean, because people they don't take as good a care with the taxpayer money as I take care of my own personal finances. And I don't appreciate that when I see that happening. I'm not saying that the previous council did that or anything like that. I'm just saying that's my motivation for going for it. So one of the challenges that I have is that a lot of what I have accomplished in my first 2 years of office here in a 4-year term is that it isn't very easily seen from the outside. I have a background in value decision theory. I spent a lot of time making sure that the decisions we make at the council level are impactful and valuable. And a lot of times that's me saying no and convincing other people to say no. So the resultant is nothing, right? And that can be really, really challenging to explain to other people that you're having a positive impact by not spending money poorly. On the other side, I have a really cool example where as a liberty-minded person, there were a number of people, hundreds of people here who wanted to have chickens as pets, okay? And that's just a really simple example, but we had at the time not allowed that. And I was able to, create relationships, create legislation, gather the votes together, put the legislation forward, have it reviewed by the public on down the process, and now people have an opportunity to have chickens as pets. So, it's a small thing, makes a lot of people happy. It also sets a nice precedence for a little bit more liberty, which is something, in addition to the tax dollars that I was looking for. But that was a really easy example for me to offer where, I had an idea that I was able to carry all the way through and get it pushed into the legislation successfully. So definitely an opportunity for impact.
Fantastic. Love the example, and never would have thought Maryland is a thing. Alberto, New Politics, y'all advise, I'm guessing, hundreds of candidates or potential candidates on running for office. Jason just talked about a benefit of being in office. Maybe what are some benefits of running for local office as opposed to federal level?
Yeah, I want to really quickly tag on to what Jason said. As an organization, we do zero policy advocacy whatsoever. We don't push our candidates to promote policies. We do not promote policies, and all of our services are completely pro bono. We would not take money from a candidate if they tried to give us money. We just don't like that transactional relationship. And our theory of change is that, you and I might disagree on policy issues, and you're in elected office, but you are enacting the chicken policies or whatever those policies might look like because you are doing what you believe, given your North Star and your values, are in the best interest of your constituents, not what's in your own best interest, not for the reasons that politicians typically run for office for power, fame, glory, whatever, but because you really care about the people within your community. And I just think that the way that Jason talked about that is just spot on, that that is the value add of veterans and national service alumni running for office and making that sort of impact, especially in local office. I think a couple of the other benefits that are important to mention on the campaign side as you're getting ready to run a campaign of running for local office, there are lower barriers to entry. So, whether it's financially, which is the thing most people come to me, fundraising is scary, and it's something that, especially as former military people, you are explicitly not allowed to fundraise, especially for political purposes. And, I think that it turns out that it's not rocket science, it's not nuclear power, and it's one of those things where it's hard work, but it's boring work, and it's just, you have to be organized and you have to call people and do whatever that takes. And so running for local office, it's easier to figure out how to do that, and it costs less. And so financially, those barriers to entry are a lot lower. Informationally too, it can be challenging sometimes navigating your state's, election website or whatever that might look like, but you can kind of get up to speed a lot quicker in deciding to run for local office. And then I think that the third benefit that I want to highlight is just it gives you an opportunity to, as you're making that impact, you're doing it for the reasons, you're pursuing things that you care deeply about. You're also building a brand. And if you're hoping to run for higher office at some point, it's an incredible opportunity to again, make meaningful change, make that a part of your narrative. And, if there's a good opportunity in the future, pursue that in the future rather than jumping 10 steps ahead and, trying to run for something at a lot higher level where you might not have that same impact. So I'll pause there, but would love to hear Jason's experience, actually doing the thing and running for office and what that campaign looked like.
Yeah, so I actually want to go back to something else you said with the, creating your brand and stuff like that. I was fortunate enough to find a mentor to help me, much like I imagine your organization does, Alberto, to help me with some of those things, because I didn't even do class, stuff like high school or anything, nothing like this. This is my first time dealing with any of this stuff. So I was completely fundraising. Actually, I'd done a little fundraising for the combined federal campaign. But anyway, back to the brand, one of the things my mentor had mentioned to me was, in addition to having your principles, consider writing them down, so that you have them in print. But then in addition to that, make a list of things that you are willing to do and a list of things you're not willing to do. And those need to be your checks and balances. Part of building your brand, in addition to your actions, are how you're changing yourself. And you're going to learn about how the sausage is made, and it's going to change some of your position and, opportunities for imposing the changes you wanted to make. But there's also an opportunity that you didn't have the impact you wanted. And, there needs to be some self-evaluation. If you're not successful, you need to consider that maybe it's not for you too. And I just wanted to be clear that I think that that's really important. I think that you were aligned with that in a certain degree. The campaign was really interesting. Talking to a lot of the constituents was a really interesting component for me because I really want to listen. I really enjoyed hearing about a lot of things. I learned so much. Again, having not been a native, born and raised Aberdeener, I needed the other people to fill me in on what some of the other problems were, because for me to just show up and say, let's knock taxes in half, that's not adequate, right? There's expectations of service. There's, decades-long problems in infrastructure, potentially, whatever. But talking with people was so fascinating. But I also had to learn another thing, which was like, you can't let one person take like 15 to 60 minutes of your campaign time because they're one vote. And that was such a challenge for me because I do empathize, I do sympathize with some of the people that I was listening to, but you have to learn how to provide value for your time. And that is really a challenge and something I had to learn. The calling and asking for money and relating people there, I didn't find that as challenging, probably because of my CFC experience, but the being able to talk to people in an efficient manner, and also talking to somebody is not going to vote for you. As soon as you have that conversation, you can't have the argument. You need to accept that vote maybe isn't there and go find some people that do. Because for every couple of people that maybe, lower your esteem or beat you down a little bit or, make you feel a little down about it, there'll be plenty of others that lift you up. And there was nothing cooler than people finding out about my principles, saying they were going to vote for me, and I had never even talked to them. They had gotten a piece of literature. They had talked to somebody else that I had spoken to, and that was really cool too, that, people start to seek you out for those things that you're trying to accomplish.
Nice. Fantastic. Thank you for that. And you're kind of bringing up the next topic I want to talk about is what's challenging about running for local office. All right, so you've talked about something, I think this is probably the same for federal level, and something I haven't heard before is as soon as you identify that someone's not going to vote for you, not going to change their mind, you got to break contact, as we said in the infantry. So Alberto, with all the folks that y'all advise, any other difficulties that you see with running at the local level that are maybe unique to the local level?
Yeah, so I kind of always turn back to these barriers to entry, and unique among most local positions, and this isn't the case with all local positions, but most of them are part-time positions. And so figuring out what to do with your job while you're campaigning, and then after you knock on wood, are eventually elected, is challenging. And it's this interesting sort of inner barrier to entry. Are you able to take maybe a few weeks off or a month off or a couple of months off at the end of your campaign to really just completely focus on the campaign itself? And not everybody is. And so thinking about that question financially, having those conversations as a family, and figuring out ways in which you can kind of get past those challenges, I think is very unique to local office and something that requires some time and effort. We are always here, happy to talk through sort of the different options that we've seen people be successful in pursuing. Jason alluded to another inner barrier to entry that a lot of people I talk to face, and it's either, by virtue of having served in the military, most of us leave home. There are very few people who are stationed within their hometown. And so, you leave home for some period of time, and maybe that's where you go back to, but you feel sort of this imposter syndrome because you haven't been there for a while. Or as Jason alluded to, you move somewhere else during your time in service or after you leave the military, and you're like, no, this is actually home. Like, I care deeply about this new community I'm a part of. My kids go to school here. Like, I'm building a career here. But again, that imposter syndrome sort of continues to seep in, that like, they're not going to see me as a native and whatever else. And I think our message always is that, like, we don't think the statistics play out, that voters actually care that much about that sort of version of imposter syndrome. And so thinking about that and being really clear about your genuine care for the community is super important. The voters care way more about that, about knowing that you genuinely care about your community and want to find ways in which you can help the community. And then the last thing that I'll say, again, along the lines of barriers to entry, while the amount of money that you have to fundraise at the local level is a lot lower, it can be a lot more difficult to fundraise. And so, it's just the spotlight's not on a lot of local races. And especially when it comes to national organizations, we are rare in the political space, supporting local, state, and federal candidates. A lot of them just, they get really caught up in sort of the federal piece. So it'll be harder to fundraise through those national organizations. And then even within maybe your personal networks, it could be harder to get them, super excited about this small local race when all the attention is elsewhere. The same thing could be said when it comes to getting noticed in terms of press and whatever else. You have to make your own opportunities, really find those opportunities both to fundraise and to get the good word out.
Outstanding. Yep. The imposter syndrome is real. There are not many folks that get out of the military and move back home, and the town that they grew up in, or the town that they left, is the same town. They've changed. The town has changed. So, yep, completely understand that. Any tips on how to overcome imposter syndrome or the fundraising or anything else you've talked about? What's something, a veteran or anyone else listening can take away? What's something they can do to overcome those things?
Yeah, so when it comes to the fundraising piece, and honestly, even the press piece, I think getting organized early, starting to, think through who's my old college roommate or an old friend that I haven't talked to in a while, keeping sort of tabs on, keeping a list of those folks, and what we call warming up your network. Start calling them. You don't have to say, hey, I'm thinking about running for the city council seat. You can say, hey, it's been a while since we talked, and I just want to catch up and hear how you're doing. And in the course of that conversation, say, I'm thinking about running for office. I don't really know what that looks like. What do you think? And it's important for two reasons. The first is the most important. You hear from someone who cares deeply about you. And, maybe you haven't talked to your old roommate in a while, but they know you really well, and they're going to give you advice that, like, nobody else will be positioned to give you that advice. And so hearing from your old roommate, like, I love the fact that you're thinking about running for local office. I've always thought that you're going to be good at something like that. Here are some of my thoughts. Like, that's helpful for getting past the imposter syndrome and everything else. And then I don't mean this to come across in sort of the cold, clinical way that it might, but you make them feel like they're a part of the process. When you call them in the future and say, hey, would you consider donating to my campaign? They feel invested in you already. They know that you trust and value their opinion. And so finding those opportunities, do that stuff early and often, and just build meaningful relationships is incredibly helpful. And I think the last thing that I'll say, and would love to hear Jason's thoughts on this, that extends to, your personal relationships, but also the ways in which you get involved in your community, you get involved politically. If the race that you're considering running for is a partisan race, join your local Democratic or Republican, party. It's something that we're so allergic to in the military as an apolitical military. But once you're out, there's an opportunity to meet people, to get involved in causes that you care deeply about, and just kind of start seeing and meeting people behind the scenes, and it's just incredibly helpful.
No, 100%. Thank you for that, Jason.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff there, Alberto. It's interesting. I believe I read a report that said 150 seats were won by third parties yesterday. So there's something to be said for that too, right? But like you were getting after, joining the bigger version of your principles and cause has an opportunity for you to expand your network, expand your resources. Forgive me, I'm trying to think of some of the other points he made, but I was nodding a lot.
Yeah, if I could hop in there really quickly,
Sure.
I know I focused on like the local Democratic and Republican parties, but even just like organizations that are politically adjacent. So if you care deeply about clean water in Maryland, join a group that's helping clean up the water in Maryland, or whatever that might look like. It doesn't necessarily have to be the parties, but getting involved and meeting people who care about the same issues that you care about, it's helpful for you, and it's helpful eventually, if and when you decide to run.
Yeah, organizations, and y'all can echo or add or disagree, but Rotary clubs, Chamber of Commerce, all these other civic organizations that are not political, but the same people that get involved in some of these organizations are also the folks that vote or know people or people that you may hear about issues in the community that everyone's deeply passionate about, taxes for the Chamber of Commerce, for example, or people that have a big network that you can tap into for future fundraising and stuff like that. So I really like your point about tap into your network that you have already and grow that. And sometimes that can take years. If you decide that you want to run for politics, so Academy Politics, I probably talk to a veteran once a month that's interested, and they're always thinking about the next race. But don't think about the race 1 year from now. So maybe think 3 years out. And what can you do in the next year to prepare yourself for 2024?
Yeah, and on the subject of, getting involved early, part of the not curing, but addressing some of the imposter syndrome is that volunteerism up front, right? So I served on the Board of Appeals, and then I had a chance within a year to go to the Planning Commission, which for Aberdeen is about as much authority as you can have before you're getting paid for it or elected. And I think I was there a year and a half, something like that. So people knew my name, knew what I stood for, knew what I was trying to bring to the table, and that helped me, in having the brand or whatever the, relationship started from that point. And that's something I would encourage anybody to do. I mean, there are so many, I'm speaking for Aberdeen, we have vacancies because we just don't have people that are even volunteering. It can be a real challenge to find people. So those opportunities most likely exist. You just, do a little digging and you can go find them. Some of them are crazy obscure, but they're still important or useful or whatever. And yeah, with a little digging, you can find out where they are. You could just go ask a council member. I'm sure they have a list of vacancies that they're dying to fill for sure. That was one of the other points I'd wanted to make though, was that, addressing the imposter syndrome, you got, the way I've chosen to do that is by bringing a certain amount of expertise. We don't have people at the higher levels of our local government as in tune with financial decision-making, value-based decision-making as myself. So sometimes I come across as the numbers guy. I understand not everything's numbers, and I try to reiterate that whenever I can, but it is a lot when I can back it up, back up my position with evidence-based decision-making tools, and that's part of what I'm trying to do. So, yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Just one quick addition here. I think that, there are just so many other ways aside from running for office at the local level that you can get involved politically, in quasi-apolitical roles. And so, whether it's being like a board person on your local VA, has a board, and like there might be opportunities to join, I think for the for the Service Academy crowd, getting an opportunity to be on the Service Academy nomination board for one of your Congress people. They need qualified people who know what it really takes to go to a Service Academy, be successful there, and move on and be successful in the military. And so, there's just so many different ways to give back, and like give back in ways that you're like, it doesn't matter if you run for office, you're like, I'm doing something really important that I derive value from and care deeply about, and get involved in those ways, and good things will come from it, whether or not you decide to run for office in the end.
Absolutely. Well, I think, Jason, a funny thing is an obscure position we have down here in Florida is mosquito control is an elected position. Obviously, I didn't know that until the last election, and there was only one person running, but it just goes to show you sometimes you just have to throw your hat in the ring. Another thing I'll piggyback on that kind of tie together things these two folks said is it doesn't have to be running for the public office that you think of normally. In Florida, we have HOAs that serve the community that you live in. There's PTAs or PTOs, where if you have a family, if you have kids, get involved in your local, you could support your family and the community that way too. So there's a lot you can do at the local level just to benefit your community at the local level and continue to be the public servant that the country needs. But then also, if you do have ambitions for state or federal level, you're going to get fundraising practice. You're going to build a network. You're going to learn how legislation. You're going to get smart on some policies that are important at the state and federal level. So it is a great stepping stone. Something we talk about in county politics is even if you do want to do federal level, consider local office as a stepping stone and as a path to, if you have those ambitions at the state or federal level. But there's plenty to do and plenty to serve at the local levels. Any closing thoughts or action items from either of y'all?
Yeah, I've got it. So we talked about a few of the things on like how to get started, and one of the things that I did, and I believe wholeheartedly should be the first step for anybody, is have your own home in order. And that looks like a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But if you are looking for public office or an elected position, it's going to affect a lot of things. It's going to take you time. It might have an impact on your finances. It might have an impact on your relationship with other people in the community. And you really need to have your house in order to start that journey. Likewise, I believe it's an older adage, but, whatever you've got, be prepared for it to be out there in the public eye somehow. And that goes back to having your house in order. Your family needs to be considered for that as well when you're talking that type of stuff. When I was looking at it, and I told you I had gotten a mentor, one of the big things that started all of this for me was it was based on a time commitment. What is the time commitment for me to actually do the job right? I mean, we meet 3 times a month regularly, but is that doing the job correctly? And, so really figuring out what the position entails and having yourself in a position where you can actually do what it entails is key to all of this, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so glad Jason said that. We're kind of just going to reiterate each other throughout the conversation. But, my first conversation with prospective candidates is introductory, just, basic elevator pitch, let's get to know each other. And the second conversation is, either talk to your partner or significant other, come up with a list of questions, or bring them into the next conversation and let's hear about the things that you are both worried about or you as a family might be worried about. And let's start thinking through some of those things. The candidates that we work with who struggle the most oftentimes, are struggling because there are these second and third order effects of not having your house in order and not being ready, again, going back to that inner barrier to entry to also take on these additional challenges. All of the courses that we offer through the nonprofit New Politics Leadership Academy are focused, that there's a lot of tactical advice we give, but we also focus a lot on what are your values, what is your personal mission, what is what we call your shadow mission, but kind of the things, the worst version of yourself. And like just having that inner clarity, spending some time being introspective and reflective before you decide to run for office is super important when you're in the midst of it all, to know what your left and right limits are, to know when you're at a crisis or whatever else, what is your North Star, what are you hoping to accomplish, and just being thoughtful about those things. Everybody does it as part of your military training. It applies to running for office and, you know, every other industry as well. And the last thing I want to say, you know, would love, you know, Josh, you have my info. You've been so great about sending people my way. Please, like, we are here to be helpful. We're getting nothing out of this transaction. We're not looking for money. We're not looking for policies. Always happy to be helpful. And please, you know, continue to reach out and send people my way, because we need more veterans to serve again through politics. Our democracy really needs it. And I think especially at the local level, you know, there's a real opportunity and need for that. So appreciate the work you're doing, and thanks for having us here.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you all both very much. I'm Josh McCarver with Academy of Politics. If you reach out to me, I will probably point you to Alberto with NewPop, or our two other organizations we work with, IVMF out of Syracuse University, or Veterans Campaign out of the West Coast. So again, Jason, Alberto, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the service both of y'all provide to our veterans and our political bipartisan effort that we're trying to do here across the country. So thank y'all both very much. Have a great day.